One of the things I don't think we talk enough about is what a privilege it is to work in this industry, right? We're literally the very first generation that had this opportunity. My dad spent his lifetime selling lighting fixtures. Your dad spent most of his lifetime selling chemicals. And why? Because when you graduated college, you took the very first job that was offered to you and you built a career out of it so you could provide for your family. And we're the first generation that was like, wait, I want a career that I find interesting. I want a career where every single day I'm excited about our job. That's a ludicrous concept when you think about the history of humankind. And I would say this about our career: it's hard as hell. Not one single day in the history of our careers has been easy. But at the same time, not one single day has been boring. Like every single day is exciting, and that is quite a privilege. And if I narrow it down, I think one of the great privileges that I've had is watching you and other people come up with big ideas. That's not my skill set. At best, I'm pretty good at understanding strategic challenges, understanding what the audience wants, but like big ideas, where do these big ideas come from? And I've been there, but I have no idea where they came from with some amazing ideas. Like you helped figure out the Human Hug Project, and we helped veterans fighting post-traumatic stress and fighting suicide, and did that to help drive incredible results for one of the biggest hotel brands in the world, right? And I've seen you do that not just in activations, but longer form content like Backcountry Strong and telling these incredible stories about Suzuki ATVs. And I've seen it over and over and over again. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a deep dive on AI in my experiences with AI and how it can work on sort of my side of the business, which is a little bit more on the business development, research, storytelling, etc. Let's dive into this week's topic, which is where do big ideas come from and what is the role that AI plays in developing these big ideas? So let's roll the credits. Let's dive in.
3, 2, 1, go!
I'm really excited about this, and I don't know why we've never really talked about this, the two of us. But I've been there and I've seen it. So let's just get right into it. Let me ask a very open-ended question, which is, where do these big ideas come from? When we're sitting there talking to some of the
Oof.
biggest brands in the world, and they tell us their needs and challenges, and very often, at least what I see, is it's not a big process and it's not big collaboration to come up with a big idea. I see you and others like you able to easily come up with a big idea. So let me mute myself and pass the mic over to you. Where do these big ideas come from?
Oh man, what a tough question. I don't know. I can only speak for myself and the team here, and what we go through. Um, I there's this term called cognitive dissonance, and it basically means you're holding disparate ideas and conflicting ideas in your head, right? Um, and you're trying to make sense of it. And every big idea I feel like it struggles with this in the beginning because you're thinking about like, well, what does the brief say? What does your customer say? But what does your competitor do? And it's like this maze that you have to navigate. And I think that's like just the starting point. That's just what you're challenged with right off the bat. And you got to figure out your way through this. Um, you know, I think a lot of it comes from really trying to understand what the customer truth is through this whole thing. I know that sounds trivial, but it's really not. Great comedy, they say, is actually based on like a core truth, right? And sometimes that truth can be really uncomfortable, right? Um, but if you give it a little time, then it actually becomes this shared human experience, tragedy, embarrassment, that we all go through. But it's really, I think the best comics dig into that and uncover it, and it's so obvious when it's said. And I think the same goes for big ideas. It's about getting to a truth that was so obvious, but nobody saw it. And then all of a sudden you're like, of course, right? That's exactly what we should say, what we should do. How we kind of get there. I mean, I'll tell you a story. I remember we were prepping for a pitch for Days In, and they really wanted to come up with a new breakthrough campaign. And I'm sitting there in a hotel room in New York City, uh, and we were like 4 weeks from the pitch, and I had taken an Ambien, right?
So this is it. Here we're
This
unpacking
is it.
the great,
Yeah.
indisputable internal truth.
Yes, I'm taking an Ambien, and I'm in that state of like, I'm not asleep, but I'm certainly not really conscious. And, that's when it hit me. And it was this idea of, okay, Days In wants to target these young families that have really not been exposed to a Days In, but we need to open them up to it. And I was like, wait a minute. All of these families, like myself, were traveling for these youth baseball, travel sports teams, travel baseball, travel soccer, travel lacrosse. I mean, it goes on. And I was like, wait a minute. What if Days In starts a baseball team for kids who just can't afford travel sports? And I don't know if I would have come up with that idea if I wasn't halfway out of my mind, right? In that trance-like subconscious state. But like, I'm not alone. Like, so many people will talk about great ideas coming from like the subconscious. So I think, great ideas really, to me, what that means is you really have to let go of all the noise in your head and really start to get at what is the truth, right? That everybody goes through. For me, my truth at that moment was every weekend I would hit the road to some podunk town in the middle of the state, and I would have to stay overnight with my kid, and the only hotels were economy hotels, right? Ritz-Carlton, Marriott, they're not setting up a hotel in Fresno, California. Days In is, and it's actually really nice. And, but that idea didn't come to me for the weeks that I was thinking about how to solve this thing, because it wasn't until I kind of tapped into that unconscious. I think that's just so true of how ideas come to you. When people talk about I take a walk, I'm in the shower, walking is almost a meditative state, right? When you really get quiet, and that's where your brain can start to tap deeper into stuff because it's actually doing something. So you're focusing in on walking, which allows your brain actually to start to tap and think deeper. Taking a shower is another one. In fact, I remember they actually say that hot water uh, on the back of your neck actually unleashes and creates increased blood flow to the cortex and to the brain. So Alan Greenspan used to come up with these amazing ideas when he was the head of the Fed. And his wife said, well, Alan would get in the bath every night and he would write. And she actually came up with, she's like, I think that was what juiced his blood flow to his brain and allowed him to tap into all this stuff. So, I think it just comes down to getting quiet and getting at what the real truth is to a problem. Um, it doesn't, come from I expect it rarely comes from a big group setting where you're in a brainstorm. Like,
Totally.
I
All
think
right.
that's
So there,
bullshit.
there's a lot in there that I'd love to unpack,
Yeah.
right? And so one of them is I actually did a bunch of research on this, and it turns out what you're alluding to is something called alpha waves, and it's basically when you calm down all the noise in your head. And so, for example, when you wake up first thing in the morning, you have alpha waves, and that's how come so many people come up with great ideas first thing in the morning, right? Paul McCartney wrote Yesterday. Keith Richards wrote Satisfaction coming out of that stupor. Keith Richards literally woke up, had the song in his head, quickly grabbed his recording, played it, passed out cold, and when he woke up a couple hours later, like satisfaction was waiting for him. He didn't even turn off the microphone. It was like you could hear him snoring at the end of it, right? And I think the issue is so many of us, last thing at night, first thing in the morning, we're hopelessly addicted to our phones. And in some ways, those phones are super powerful for what you're talking about because you're taking in all these ingredients. At the same time, they fight against those alpha waves. So if we could dive into this a little bit deeper, tell me, because you're an early riser, and I don't know much about how you construct the rest of your day, but like tell me like how do you construct your day to enable you to find these consumer truths, to enable you to have that deeper thinking and those fresh ideas? You know, if Greenspan is sitting in the bathtub for a couple hours every night with a notebook, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's always a morning routine for me. Um, getting up, you know me, I get up at 4:30 in the morning. Um, that's just, the time that I could think the clearest. I'm probably not alone in this, right? I mean, you said it, like, that's when the alpha waves are going. That's when I'm most receptive, to being in a creative mindset. Come 5 o'clock at night, like, I need to put on something mindless. Um, but then when I go to bed and I turn my brain off, like, it comes back.
Yeah.
Right, but it's a shorter time period, but it's actually more powerful, when you're in that state. In the morning, it's just, you're so open, um, and emotionally ready to be moved, that I think that's what really does it for me. Like, I am just, I I'm a visual person, whether I'm scrolling on Instagram or I'm on Pinterest or whatever, uh, that's when creative can really move me, and so I'm taking it all in, as inputs, and then I'd say later on at night, that's when all those inputs then get turned into, like, a creative spark or idea when I'm just about to go to sleep and I'm in that in-between state.
Yeah, I think that's what I've observed out of you, which is you consume a boatload of content. You're getting up early and consuming a ton of content. Those are the ingredients. And I think what you're unpacking and revealing now is you can take all those ingredients and let your subconscious sort of process it late at night or while you're sleeping, and then come to you sort of in the morning or other times when you have time away from the conference room, et cetera. There's a great book by Jeff Tweedy, the musician. It's called How to Write One Song. And he's like, dude, I'm not going to teach you how to, write a whole album, how to become a great musician. Just try one song. It's a nice little tight book. And one of his ideas, and I've used it, is your brain will solve shit while you're sleeping, right? So take whatever you're noodling on, whatever challenge you have, and read last thing before you go to bed. Then go to bed, and you'll be shocked how often, and I've proven this through focus group of one, how often you'll wake up the next morning like, oh yeah, I got it solved. I got it figured out.
Yeah, if you just let your brain relax a little bit, right? All of a sudden, yeah, the solution arrives. Um, yeah, it is amazing, and I feel like today we just don't give ourselves the space to do that. I think that's one of the downfalls of having a phone in your pocket 24/7. Um, every moment you find yourself with a spare few minutes, you pick up the phone. Right? I've actually tried, like, to train myself not to do that or to leave my phone at home, when I go out for a few hours. Um, it's it's really, a game changing. Like, don't turn on the stereo in the car, like, just roll the windows down and go, or go take a walk. I think walks are one of the best things to kinda let your brain go and unleash ideas. Um, I th Bezos talks about this, Ray Dalio talks about this. Meditation's another one, where they're able to quiet their mind, and that's when they talk about creativity really starting to ignite. A great example of this is somebody who I love is the director Christopher Nolan. Um, he did Batman, he did, Inception, uh, Oppenheimer. Um, he doesn't own a phone.
No way.
Doesn't own a phone.
Dude,
Yeah,
what a genius. First of all, my wife would love me so much more if I did not own a phone. But
right.
really, he just refuses. Like the most
Yeah,
important thing to him is his creativity, and he's going to defend it at all costs.
yeah. That's right.
Genius.
Isn't it fun? Could you imagine, like, going a week without a phone? Like, I think it'd be amazing,
Amazing.
amazing.
Life-changing. I
Yes.
think about, like, you and I going on our fly fishing trips in the rivers of Wyoming and Colorado. Like, those are the only times I ever turn that thing off. And yes, I feel it, and we can all feel that it impacts us, right? So I don't think we're gonna turn into Christopher Nolan, but I love what you're doing, which is, and I watch you do it because I'm texting you, like, "Where are you, dude?" Like, you'll just turn it off, particularly on the weekends. You'll just leave it behind and
Yeah.
clear your brain. So speaking of, Christopher Nolan, right? I think there's another story that you have about J.J. Abrams and the importance, I think, of, building muscle memory and getting those reps in. Can you remind me about that story?
Yeah, JJ, when he was in film school, um, he he had to did this interview afterwards later on, but he says, "The thing I noticed in film school was everybody would talk about these great stories and ideas they were gonna write, but nobody ever wrote them, right? And he decided right then and there that instead of going to parties and events, he was gonna go back home and write. And he just wrote script after script after script, and that's how he got his reps in. Um, and, I think there's a big difference between people who have a great idea and people who execute on the great idea. And, I think JJ was like a realized that at a really young age. You're not gonna get it perfect, but you need to do it anyway, and that's where the reps comes in. The other great story about JJ is when he was 13 years old, he sent away in this mail order catalog for this box of, I think it was like Wizardry and Wonder, something like that. I'm gonna screw it up. But, the box came and it had promised to have all of these amazing things inside that were going to captivate and blow your mind and be able to do all this stuff, and I think it was part magic tricks, part storytelling, part objects and crystal balls. I'm not even sure. He didn't even know what was in it. He received it at 13 years old, and he has never opened it,
Ha!
and it sits in
That's
his office
awesome.
on the shelf,
Yes. That's
and it's
awesome,
just
and
the
he is a
wonder,
genius.
yes, of what's in there.
Those remind me of, listening to, Lin-Manuel in this documentary that I saw, and he was, like, literally going to a party, and he's taking the subway, and he gets to the party, and all of a sudden, as soon as he arrives, he had a song in his head. He's like, "I'm out." He's like, "Where are you going, dude? You just got to this small party. Like, we're so happy to see you. Haven't seen." He's like, "Dude, I don't give a shit about anything other than this creative epiphany. I'm out." Went home and wrote like the theme song to Hamilton or one of the critical songs. I can't remember which, but like, I think that goes back to that whole like get quiet thing, which is A, to your point, get quiet so you can come up with those ideas, but also get quiet enough to be like, all right, now I'm going to do something with it. Because it's one thing to
Yeah.
get quiet and then you look at your phone or you don't do anything about it. But I think what you're talking about with Nolan and Abrams and Lin Manuel is then go and write and do something about it.
Yeah, and, I've had this conversation with a lot of my creatives. Y Oftentimes, the great idea happens right away.
Yes.
It's not through laboring. Like,
Yes.
I think I've talked to you about this, like, we come out of a meeting, the first meeting with an onboarding with a client, and I'm like, I I know what their next campaign is gonna be.
I've seen
Or
it every time.
or
I
or I'd
always get
write it.
worried when it's like, "Let's go to the conference room and let's all
Yeah,
brainstorm." I'm like, "Fuck, no, that's no, please,
yeah,
can we not do that?
because
Can we
somebody
get in
said
touch with that
something.
initial spark?"
Yeah, somebody said something in the meeting, and it was like, "Oh, no, that's it. That's not
Yes.
a passing remark, that's it."
Yeah.
And, I would write it down. I would try not to tell anybody because I wanted people to feel like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back and do a lot of work." But, like, at the end of the day, like, no idea came that was better than that.
Yeah.
And so, uh, trust your gut with this stuff. Oftentimes, that very first idea, that moment of spark of brilliance, right? That is not you didn't come up with, but you identified when it passed by,
Yes.
right? You're like, "Wait, stop." You know, I think that's where the big ideas come from. That's where, like, all those inputs that I digest in the morning and whatnot. I'm not formulating some great idea. I'm just kinda saying, "Oh, wait, that's it over there,"
That's
and then pulling
it's
that
so
one
true.
closer.
I've watched you do that so many times. It reminds me, I'm gonna butcher this one. There's this Paul Simon story. I heard once, and they asked him, like, how long did it take to write that song? He's like, took me about 4 minutes to get it on paper, but it took me a lifetime to write it, right? And the point is, if we bring back to your earlier point, you're getting up at like 4:30 in the morning, you're consuming tons of content, right? And then in the evening, you're still like you're addicted to this game that which we all are. You're consuming an astronomical amount of content. You're taking in those inputs, not just on the story side, but also on the data side. So you can see what ideas work, what ideas don't work, and all of that stuff is sitting in your self-conscious. And then when somebody has a spark of something like, hey, here's an audience with an unmet need, it's not like, dude, I didn't put any work into it. You spent decades consuming that content to come up that idea. And then to your point, just trust your gut that you're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. If you were to look at my Instagram save folder, it would be a window into my soul,
Yeah.
which I think is just crazy. Yeah, I've showed it to my wife, and, like, it's so varied and crazy and different and all over the map, but it's, like, all the stuff that has moved me at 4:30 AM in the morning to the point where I'm like, "Oh my god, like, that's brilliant." I need to save that.
Yeah, I see you do that not just on Instagram, but on your laptop. You always have these crazy, beautiful images, but not just images, but storytelling images like that. What is that classic Porsche that has like the surfboard on the back, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like you
Yeah.
images
Yeah.
like that. When you look at those images and they tell a really provocative story. And I think the point here is that you're perpetually feeding your creativity. Part of it is on the data side, part of it is on the storytelling side. So your brain is always in motion. And I think it's fascinating what you're talking about earlier, which is it doesn't happen in the conference room, right? I think you sort of unpack that. And I realized as we got older and we were under tight time crunches for things like a pitch, and you don't have time to dilly-dally around, right? A pitch is like a year's worth of work in 2 or 3 weeks. And we used to sit in the conference room, and eventually you and I were like, "Dude, we're out of here." People are like, "Where are you going?" Like, "We're going for a run. We're going for a walk. Jordan, you going one way, I'm going the other." But like, and for me, and I'm not an ideator, but just even to unpack strategy, it would take me, and I'm not a great runner by any stretch, but the first 2 miles is just like clearing my brain. I need 20 minutes just to get the shit out. And then I remember running and just be like, shit, it ain't coming to me. But eventually your mind quiets down and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there it is. So like, how do you do that? How do you break our addiction to being like, let's have a brainstorming session. Let's get on Zoom. Let's go to the conference room. Like, how do you work with your team to make sure that they're getting in touch with their quiet selves?
For some people, a group setting can work, like a two-person setting, art director, copywriter, right? That has worked really well if you trust your partner, and you can do that. For me, it was always taking a walk, and just allowing those ideas to come out, and then using the group setting to refine and sharpen the idea, right? Because that's when you really can take a great idea and make it more holistic and more strategic. One of the things, I'm sure you do and most people do when they get a spark of creative, is music can influence so much of that. And I've noticed, if I'm listening to the wrong music, the right ideas won't come out.
Yes.
Like, the music has to actually align to the brand or the problem or whatever I'm trying to solve or the emotion I'm trying to create. That helps a lot. So from 1940s jazz to 90s hip hop to, classical, like, it
Yeah.
just doesn't matter.
Have you, I can't remember if you ever talked about this. Have you ever taken a song and put it on loop? Not to come up with an idea, but once you have an idea and you need to like build a deck and just sort of deep dive into it. I read this somewhere along the way and it totally works. Take a song and put it on loop. And then it just
Mhm.
becomes a rhythm. It won't get you there for hours, but I found I have attention deficit issues, but I can find myself getting into some deep hardcore focus for 45 minutes because that one single song just sort of drives you along and becomes a force that pushes you and doesn't distract you.
That's
Crazy.
interesting. I put an album on loop, and this
Yeah.
one album I've used so many times.
Can I
It's,
guess? Can I guess?
you know it.
Is it Gattaca? Are you going Gattaca?
No,
Oh,
no, it's not Gattaca. It's, The Social Network by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Like, that was
Give
a
it another try.
groundbreaking soundtrack. Like, they had never done a soundtrack before, and David Fincher, longtime Nine Inch Nails fan, went to Trent and said, "I want you to do the soundtrack for this." And for those of you who forgot what it sounds like, it is amazing, and changed, I think, the way soundtracks are put together, for the next 10, 15 years since that movie came out. And now you'll see there's so much weird electronica music that has taken the place of traditional symphony sounds.
Huh, I'm gonna check it out today. But I'll never forget Gattaca when you and I started this thing and we couldn't even afford 2
Right?
chairs. We had 2 CDs, one of them was Gattaca. You introduced me to it, and we had that thing on repeat all the time. Let me get to the big question, which I almost forgot about, which is core to where we started, which is what role does AI now play in developing these big ideas?
So people aren't going to want to hear this, but AI's gotten really good at coming up with big ideas. The challenge is finding the right prompts to get it to think the way you want it to. Um, Over the last 12 months with, ChatGPT, um, or even Grok, uh, if you give it the right prompts, it will think incredibly outside the box. And I'll totally lay bare kind of how I do it. Um, the first is you got to give it like context as to what is the bar like you're trying to achieve. And so what you're going to tell it to do is go to and look at the can line winners in a category over the last 3 years.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yes. You can feed it with links, you can feed it with case studies, like whatever you want, or or it can do its own research. It now starts to understand like the caliber of work that's winning. Then you tell it, I want ideas that are more breakthrough, more outside the box, and more challenging than even what won Cannes Lion last year in that category. And then you're going to get a bunch of ideas back. And then you're going to challenge it again to go even further and be more provocative and be more unexpected. Um, and you keep refining the answers that keep coming back. Sometimes you have to start over again and backtrack. But you end up with a set of ideas that become the launching point for you to go take a walk and to sharpen them and make them better, right? Um, that was not the case 24 months ago with ChatGPT. I think most creatives who aren't afraid to use AI would say the same thing. Um, it is a great primer and get your creative juices flowing into areas maybe you haven't thought of. And look, I think it serves the same purpose as going to the Cannes Lion website and looking at what has won before, so you understand the structure and the craft of putting together a really great breakthrough idea. Like we are, like at the end of the day, creatives, we're craftspeople. We're not artist in the traditional sense. Nobody's buying my artwork. So I need to be a craftsperson. The only way to do that is to really understand the structure and the nuance and the narrative. It's like a playwright or a script writing. Like there is a craft and you have to understand and know it. And I think that's what AI does a really good job of helping you start to structure and put ideas together if you feed it right.
I like the word you're using there, primer. So you're not outsourcing it. You're not saying come up with the big ideas, but what you're saying is help me expedite the process to get my creative juices flowing so you can go and get into that quiet space in your own brain. And
Yeah.
ultimately, the ideas are human ideas. They come from you and other craftspeople, but you're fueled and it's expedited with AI.
Yeah, it feeds you territories. It feeds you ways to use different channels or partners. It gets you thinking outside your own constraints. And look, AI is trained on human data, right? It's not like I'm using a computer's brain, right, to come up with the idea. I'm using a computer's brain to aggregate all the things that we've already done in the past and to create new formulas, right?
Yeah.
And to sort through those and say, look, 8 out of 10 of these suck, but there's 2 that it's come up with that have promise.
Yeah.
And if you can identify those 2 and see that they can be pushed, then that's a great way to use AI in the big idea concepting phase.
Yeah, and I love your terminology here of craftspeople, right? And I think what we as a society and we as an industry, we've been overpromised with the power of AI. Oh no, AI is going to do everything. I just saw a video the other day, like they're in the conference room and the CEO or somebody is like, "We need this," and then everyone's around the table like, "Okay, AI is going to solve it." It makes the TV ads, it does your media placement. What a load of bullshit, right? We know that A, that's overpromising, and B, if it could even execute upon that, you're going to get some pretty shit results. And I love the way you're saying it is this is an input. And this is totally unscientific. But if we were to quantify the role of the human versus the role of AI in this, where we're falsely getting promised AI is going to do 90% or 100% of the work, when it just comes down to coming up with big ideas, quantify how much of that is based upon human expertise and how much of that comes from AI.
Is the human expertise like the prompt of what I'm
Everything.
asking it?
Yes. Everything from the prompting, the prompt engineering, the driving the conversation to the, okay, thanks, GPT or whatever. Now I'm going for a huge walk. Like, what percentage role does AI play in coming up with a big idea?
Oh, I think it's probably 30 to 40%.
Yep.
Um, uh, but, you're only gonna arrive at those 2 concepts out of the 20 it served you, by continually reprompting, the engine. And, we've cataloged how to do this with the right prompts, um, and we're constantly refining it. But again, I feel like it still takes a lot of human involvement to get what you want out of it. It's kinda like using an Adobe program like Premiere. Like, I could teach you all the tools, like, yeah, you can go edit a quick movie, but, uh, the human creativity, right, to use those tools correctly, that makes all the difference in terms of what you're gonna get out of it. Are you gonna get a quality product or not?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect summary statement because I think we've talked about this quite a bit. Like, I can learn all that software. I can learn Photoshop. I can learn all those things, and I'll never be great. Right? Same thing with AI and ideation. I'll never be great. I can be good. Nobody wants good. Good sucks, right? You're looking for great. And there's a genetic limitation to it, right? So, what it requires are true craftspeople, as you describe them, who are genetically gifted, who are inherently interested. So they're taking in all these ingredients, feeding those genetic skills. And then by the time you get to AI, that's just a relatively quick exercise. The way you're describing it is still hours and hours of work, but you're really drafting off of a lifetime of work and a lifetime of genetic skills.
100%. AI has been trained on what has come before, right? So it's trying to create something that has already been done, right? Because it's training on data that from the past, even if it's yesterday. Creatives are trying to create something that's new and hasn't been seen before, right? And so that's where I feel like in everything I've seen, the only way to make that leap into trying to create something new, uh, and put it in the market that maybe challenges or redefines a category, that takes the human element. AI might be the primer, but in order to take it over the finish line, to set a new trend or to break through, you need the human element because we're the consumers, not the computer, right? We have to be moved. We have to be emotionally charged by this stuff, not any sort of AI or LLM. That's not who we're building this for. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what the LLM. It's all they can do is just base it on what's come before, and that's not going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. Really well said. Last question. How important is it for you that your LLM has been fed with so much knowledge about yourself and your preferences, our value proposition, our reasons to believe, the way we think, our case studies. Like you've been pumping all of it into I guess it's ChatGPT or Claude or both or whatever for a while. Like how important is it that your system has a lifetime of knowledge about the way you think?
I think it's great when you're creating strategy decks or processes. I think it really works well. I actually have a number of ChatGPT accounts, so it doesn't always pull from what I've put in it over the last 2 years.
Wait,
And
what?
I
How
think
does that work? You have multiple subscriptions or you set up
multiple
different profiles?
subscriptions, yeah, into ChatGPT where I can get out of all the stuff it knows about me, and I can be something completely new and different, and you'll get different outputs that way. It's almost like, if you're on Twitter and you just subscribe to one trend or one political party, you're gonna live in a vacuum. You have to get out of that, and so I think it's really important for creatives if you're gonna use AI to have multiple accounts and logins and to
Oh
kinda
my God.
reset it.
Dude, I was about to wrap this whole thing up and we've just uncovered something I never even thought of. Wait, so you literally, so $20 a month,
Yeah.
Jordan at Questus or whatever, you have multiple of these accounts which are basically separated from each other so you can get fresh and different thinking across the
Yes.
board.
Yes, because even if you tell it, "Don't discard everything I've ever put in," like, it can't do that. It still pulls from what's been done before, the what I've asked it of it before. So, yes, have different accounts.
That's bananas. And
Yes.
does each account have a different persona?
No, and you don't even have to use the paid version. You can use the free version if you want, right? But if I think the paid version is great for some of the more like ChatGPT 5 and the pro version, which has replaced deep research now. That's great for insights and mining data points and all that sort of stuff. But if you're just talking about creativity and whatnot, um, starting with a clean slate is uh, I find I get different ways in than I would have with my existing 2-year-old account that has all the legacy knowledge.
That is totally bananas. That
Yes.
idea had never even crossed my mind.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's take it and end on a high note. That was awesome, man. Thank you for the guidance.
Yeah.
And thanks everyone for joining us on Brand Champions.
Brand Champions is a QUESTUS production. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and review wherever you tune in. You can submit mailbag questions to brandchampions@questus.com.